Hey everyone, welcome to another edition of AP QuarantinEnglish. I just wanted to say I miss you all. Um, Hopefully the quarantine is treating you well. Today I want to talk about character connections, right? We've seen a lot of characters be introduced to Great Expectations. We get some new ones in chapters 11 through 14. Um, and I want to just kind of spend some time talking about, the relationships to each other. There's a term we sometimes use to describe fiction, and that is Dickensian, meaning in the style of Dickens. We do this with other writers as well. We talk about something being Hemingway-esque. One of the things that Dickensian can mean is that characters who are just briefly introduced in the beginning end up playing a big role in the end, and all of these things that come up end up being very neatly tied up. So I want to make sure we pay attention to some of those characters that will show up later and have very important roles. So let's take a look at Charles Dickens' Great Expectations, the characters so far. We have Pip and my convict. We have the other convict in Joe and Mrs. Joe, Pumblechook, Biddy, Miss Havisham, Estella, of course, the pale young gentleman, and the burly gentleman. Now, there's some more characters that we've met. The Hubbles and Mr. Wopsle. I think the Hubbles are there in order to get to Hubble's great aunt, who's then important for us to get to Biddy. But up through the first 14 chapters, these are the important ones. So we start, of course, with Pip. He's our main character. In the beginning of the book, he's like 6 or 7, but by now, when he is working for Joe, he's probably 15 or 16. Of course, the first person he meets is my convict. And that relationship in the beginning is built on fear. We don't know as much about my convict, but Pip is certainly afraid of him. The convict does, of course, thank Pip for the food, but that's really about it. Now, the next one is the other convict, and of course, their relationship is one of mutual hate. My convict was going to get his liberty, but when hearing that the other convict was free, gave that up in order to bring the other convict back to prison. So that really shows that hate. After that, we have Joe, and Pip and Joe's relationship seems one of friends, right? It's certainly one where they have love for each other. But Pip and Joe's love, right, while it's mutual, Pip also seems to be a little ashamed of Joe by the end of chapter 14, and he has resentment towards him, and so we see that going on. Now, after this, we have Mrs. Joe, and certainly Pip and Mrs. Joe seem to resent each other, right? Pip resents Mrs. Joe because she is abusive towards him, and Mrs. Joe seems to resent Pip because he's been a burden, one that she didn't expect to have when she was that young. And that kind of works with Joe too, right? Mrs. Joe resents Joe because he's just a blacksmith, but Joe, on the other hand, seems to love Mrs. Joe, and we've found out that that's probably due to his background with his own father, who was an abusive alcoholic, and certainly treated his mother very poorly, and beat her. And Joe kind of decided that he would never treat anyone that way, and he's overall then very, very kind, even to Mrs. Joe, who is cruel to him. Now, Mrs. Joe and Pumblechook seem to have a mutual like, right? They get along very well. They seem to both have eyes toward kind of the higher class kinds of things. They both want to be social climbers, and they get along together and spend a lot of time together. as opposed to then Pip. And Pip and Pumblechook have a relationship of mutual dislike. Pumblechook tries to take credit for everything good that's happened to Pip. The money he gets for being with Miss Havisham and even being introduced to Miss Havisham. But Pip, as he's getting older, recognizes what Pumblechook does and how obnoxious he kind of is. He calls him an ass, which is ironic because Pip is kind of an ass to Joe in his resentment of Joe's life. So there's that. But they certainly are not great fans of each other. That brings us to Biddy. For Pip sees Biddy as his first teacher and a confidant. And Biddy's the one who's taught Pip to learn to read because Hubble's great aunt just sleeps through class. And Pip also, he tells her, the kinds of the things that he's feeling. On page 96 in my text, he says that he doesn't know why he told her everything, though he thinks he knows now, suggesting that, when he's older, he realizes that maybe there was some romantic feelings there, but they stayed beneath the surface. Will anything happen? We'll see. That brings us to Miss Havisham. And Pip certainly admires Miss Havisham, and despite the fact that she seems to us as this decrepit, decaying old woman, she represents great wealth and gentility to Pip. And it does seem kind of peculiar because, to us, she doesn't represent, being high class very well, but to Pip, she's a symbol of that to him. Now, how does she feel about Pip? I mean, she does seem to like him, but, whereas Pip tells her that he wants to be more educated and that sort of thing, and this is on page 95 in my book, she seemed to prefer my being ignorant. And so she's happy to have him as the blacksmith's boy and just have the relationship that they do. That is very different than the relationship that Miss Havisham has with Estella. And she certainly praises Estella a lot, and we can see that she cares for Estella in some ways. We might not approve of the way she cares for her, teaching her to break Pip's heart and that sort of thing. But certainly she cares about her. We don't really hear what Estella thinks about Miss Havisham yet. Now Pip, of course, we know he has admiration for Estella, but she just responds with condescension. Why is it that we want the things we can't have, right? That seems to be kind of the question here. Now, this is going to lead us to two characters who don't have names yet. So we don't really know their role, but I promise you, in Dickensian fashion, they will be very important later on. The first is the pale young gentleman, we don't really know what the relationship is going to be. We know that the pale young gentleman, even in his challenging Pip to a fight, seems to be courteous, seems to have good manners. Now we know the burly gentleman, he's the one who's coming down the stairs, his hands smell of soap. He seems kind of gruff, but and aggressive, and Pip says, he's probably not a doctor. He's too gruff and aggressive for that. But instead, we don't know. He seems an imposing presence for sure. And it's, again, worth noting his hands smell of a scented soap. So those are our characters so far. Of course, we'll meet some more as we go on, but these are the ones that are important. So, all right, I hope you have a good weekend, and I hope everyone stays well. The few of you in A through G who will be into school Monday, I look forward to seeing you. All right.